Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us here at KAKM for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up on the satellite imagery from yesterday, we started out pretty sunny here across south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, clearing up to the north, but low pressure coming onto the southwest coast, and then all this moisture streaming northeastward ahead of that. That's what brought the 1 to 2.5 inches of rain in across the Anchorage area last evening. Otherwise, just kind of a departing low here over the southern southeast coast, and then a lot of more moisture coming northeastward there back across the central and eastern Aleutian areas. Then some moisture back up through here that's starting to spill out into the northwest Bering Sea today. That'll be dropping southeastward. Did drop southeastward, and that'll bring some rain across the Pribilof Islands with small craft advisory winds tonight into early tomorrow. Otherwise, that low center has tracked eastward over the southern Cook Inlet this afternoon. All that moisture now, the heaviest precipitation shifting eastward to the North Gulf Coast over to Yakutat and starting to increase, the clouds increased across the entire southeast coast today with rain along the central and north coast this afternoon and toward Elfin Cove. Increasing rain around the Juneau area, but still dry down to the south, and then areas of rain continuing across Cordova, up into Valdez, areas of rain across the Copper River Basin, conditions becoming more showery back here to the west as the main low continues off to the east there, but drier conditions, but a lot of clouds covering much of southern and even into the interior, but some good breakout up here over the northwest valleys and the Seward Peninsula, seeing a fair amount of sunshine today up in that area. Even places like Point Hope had clear skies just about the entire day this afternoon, but a lot of low clouds and fog socked in Kivalina, and that same pattern up there along the central and eastern Arctic coast. Had some areas of fog this morning, but that became a lot more isolated, just generally cloudy skies there across the north slope. And again, the rain changing to showers here across south central Alaska. Showers continuing, especially along the Alaska Range, but really tapering off back to the west of the mountains there, and just clouds out here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area. Some scattered showers from northeast Bristol Bay down along the Alaska Peninsula. And a few breaks there along the east side of Kodiak Island, and then the rainfall on the increase here along the southeast coast. There were some isolated thunderstorms along the eastern Alaska Range, but more activity was noted up across the eastern interior, upper Tanana Valley, and along the White Mountains with again, very isolated lightning strikes back toward the Koyukuk Valley and over the eastern interior, but the showers are a little more numerous than the thunderstorms in those areas. And then this moisture right through here tonight, that'll be dropping southeastward across the Pribilof Islands. So look for kind of a general rain and fog drizzle type of pattern there with west winds. Forecast to be up to 25 knots through that area, kind of an increase in the winds, especially for St. George Island. Strongest winds along and to the south of the Pribilofs there. Some of that moisture will spill into the Alaska Peninsula here this evening, or actually late tonight, for a chance of a few showers there over the Cold Bay, False Pass area, and possibly even into Unalaska late tonight. Otherwise, we've got low pressure here in the Gulf of Alaska, and the front with southwest flow brings rain into much of the southeast coast, changing to showers here along the North Gulf Coast. Still looks mostly cloudy with scattered to numerous showers here across the Copper River Basin and south central Alaska. Chances of some thunderstorms here from the eastern interior down southeastward there to about Denali Park in that area, but staying dry back to the north and west. Some of that dry air will begin sliding southward here, so look for some partial clearing. It'll be dry here across the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, but may see a few breaks in the clouds this evening or overnight tonight. Still a lot of low clouds and fog over the northern Bering Sea areas and the St. Lawrence Island up to Tin City. And then again, fog increases there along the central and eastern Arctic coast. And those winds still a little brisk there, east-northeast, 15 to 20 miles an hour there for the western Arctic coast. Lighter winds over to the east. And then for tomorrow, we'll see this area of moisture drops down and does bring some showers or periods of rain to the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian areas there. And the winds will be northwest, possibly up to small craft advisory levels there, especially for the eastern Aleutians, not so much for the Alaska Peninsula. Look for some clearing over Kodiak Island, still a risk of a shower in that area, and then mostly cloudy with scattered showers in the forecast here for south central Alaska. Chance of thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon along the western Alaska Range, eastern Kuskokwim Valley area, again up into the east central interior areas, and showers here along the North Gulf Coast. And the main band of rain shifts down across the southern panhandle there, but still be numerous showers back to the north, some of those moderate at times. And as that showers kind of move in and interact with the terrain, it almost creates just a general rain condition there, but the main rain band should drop to the south of the frontal boundary. And then more dry air coming southeastward here makes for a little more clearing over the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, maybe even some clearing showing up around Togiak and Dillingham there in Bristol Bay, and definitely along the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula, while the Bering Sea side stays pretty well socked in clouds and possibly some areas of fog. And then the forecast for Tuesday, again with the main trough axis here over the Gulf of Alaska, southwest flow, that'll keep several bands of showers rotating in across the southeast coast. So mostly cloudy, scattered showers, scattered to numerous showers at times for the entire length of the panhandle there. Maybe a little bit less down toward Dixon Entrance, but still drier here for the North Gulf Coast. Less in the way of shower activity, but thunderstorms possible over the Wrangell Mountains. And a little bit better chance of thunderstorm activity here along the western Alaska Range, eastern Kuskokwim Valley areas, all the way down into northeast Bristol Bay. As that trough drops into the area there, that'll bring some more clouds and showers possibly into Kodiak Island, especially along the western and southwest part of the island there. Otherwise dry along the Alaska Peninsula, dry for the eastern Aleutians, kind of a weak ridge of high pressure here over the eastern Bering Sea areas, and partly to mostly sunny skies from about the Yukon Delta northward. Should be mostly dry over the Kuskokwim Valley areas. And again, the scattered thunderstorms over the eastern interior. No change up on the Arctic coast there, low clouds and fog. Low clouds over the north slope, areas of fog on the eastern Arctic coast over to about Barrow, but those northeast winds now lightening up there on the west side, probably just down to about 15 knots there in the marine forecasts, and pretty light wind conditions here all across the Bering Sea. Big area high pressure out over the western Aleutians, or actually the central Aleutian areas there. So light winds means a lot of low clouds and fog, widespread IFR across the entire area both tomorrow and Tuesday. Temperatures down along the panhandle this afternoon were mostly in the upper 50s to lower 60s, 63 at Annette, one of the warmer locations. Klawock was up to 60, 62 at Skagway, but Juneau had 58. Sitka also 58 with rain, Yakutat rain and 56, 54 at both Valdez and Gulkana, both stations there reporting rain at 4 p.m., 55 at Cordova, 66 up there at Northway. Fairbanks almost reaching 70 degrees this afternoon, but 10 degrees cooler over at Tanana. Otherwise, where the sun was out there, Bettle 71, 70 degrees at Ambler, and Indian Mountain at 70, with 51 at Kotzebue, 59 degrees and sunshine in Point Hope, and 57 clear skies there at Point Lay, but low clouds keeping Barrow cool with the northeast breeze, only 37 this afternoon. But again, sunshine across the Seward Peninsula there, Nome up to 61, 63 at Golovin, and more clouds kept it in the 50s here over the southwest interior. Macoriac at 52. Gamble at 48 there on St. Lawrence Island. St. Paul had 51, a little cooler at St. George. Upper 40s over the western Aleutians, and the eastern Aleutians lower 50s, and kind of a 50-degree weather regime here along the Alaska Peninsula up into Bristol Bay. Lows tonight in the lower to mid-50s for the southeast coast, and upper 40s to lower 50s here across southern Alaska, mostly in the 50s through the central interior, and 40s for the Brooks Range, North Slope and central and eastern Arctic coast into the lower to mid-30s again tomorrow morning. Start the day off in the upper 40s to lower 50s there over the northwest interior, with mostly in the 40s here along the southwest coast and over the Aleutians. And for highs tomorrow, not too bad here, back up near 70 degrees over the west central interior from about the mid-Tanana Valley area back to the west into the Seward Peninsula, and then increasing sunshine or clearing conditions allow temperatures back into the 60s here for the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, and even portions of Bristol Bay. Looks like highs mostly in the mid-60s here for south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast in the 50s, upper 50s for the Panhandle. Flying weather looks like pretty marginal VFR flying conditions. Dixon entrance across all of the southeast coast there in the North Gulf Coast, and then improving over the Copper River Basin. Looks like VFR breaking out across Cook Inlet into Prince William Sound, but an area of marginal VFR, central western Alaska Range right down into northeast Bristol Bay, and then a huge area of IFR out here over the Bering Sea, hugging the coastline, Nunivak Island, the Yukon Delta, extending northward across St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait. Again, that same pattern of IFR along the central and eastern Arctic coast, especially during the morning hours, and then that IFR extending all the way back to Shimia. Looking at passes Anatuvik, and both Anatuvik and Adigan, the Brooks Range, will be open tomorrow with VFR flying there across the entire range, with Lake Clark and Merrill looking a little marginal throughout the entire day tomorrow. Same forecast for rainy, marginal VFR, windy, marginal VFR as well, with Isabel looking marginal, but Mentasta should be VFR there farther to the east, and Tanita, marginal VFR to start with, becoming VFR during the morning hours. Same forecast for Portage, lower conditions early on, becoming better as the day wears on. Chilkoot and White, though, marginal VFR the entire day on both entrances. Freezing levels, a little cool up here along the North Slope and the Brooks Range area, about 6,000 to 8,000 feet, but not all that cold. 8,000 feet again, covering much of the central and southern interior. A little bit cooler here in the Gulf of Alaska, and 8,000 to 10,000 feet over the southern southeast coast, with a lot of warm air out over the southwest Bering and western Aleutians. Freezing levels up to 14,000 feet out in that area. And icing threats, no icing out to the west with basically high pressure, no icing through much of the interior. The main area of significant icing tomorrow, the best chance of it will be from Dixon entrance across the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast into the southeast interior, and that'll be mostly above 8,000 feet of the light to isolated moderate rime type icing. And the upper level wind flow chart, this low pressure area that yesterday was out here by Nunivak Island, tracking across southern Cook Inlet today, just sort of inching its way eastward into the Gulf of Alaska. That's going to keep southwest flow into the Panhandle for the rain tonight, and then that front kind of drags across the southern areas tomorrow. But southwest flow, several bands of showers will be rotating in across the Panhandle. Got drier northwest flow back out to the west. And for 9,000 feet, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots here over the southwest interior. Generally weak flow, mostly cyclonic in nature there, indicating a trough of low pressure, keeping it showery and unsettled across much of the area. Still northerly winds there, keeping the low clouds and fog in along the Arctic coast, but northwesterlies up to 30 knots there across the Fox Islands tomorrow. And 25 knot northeasterlies here, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope. Northwest, west-northwest winds 20 to 25 knots here coming across the Alaska Peninsula out of the southeast Bering Sea. Low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, but very light and variable wind conditions along the North Gulf Coast and southeast into south central Alaska. But could see some winds up to 25 knots here across Prince of Wales Island and Dixon entrance, especially in the afternoon. Some of those winds on the increase there during the afternoon tomorrow. Otherwise, westerly flow on the light side there for the eastern Arctic coast, still northeast on the west side. Turbulence, look for occasional light to moderate chop of Prince of Wales Island the entire day, and then that increasing over toward Clarence Strait and over the southern southeast coast, but pretty smooth up to the north. Nothing at all serious or significant as way of turbulence over interior Alaska, except still possibly the western Arctic coast there, Point Lay on down to Point Hope, but pretty smooth here along the west coast, and then those mechanical turbulence there from about the Pribilof southeastward across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians, and from Sitkinak back over toward Chignik. And after the segment, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
Welcome back. We'll look for small craft advisories here along the south coast of the Panhandle. Southerlies 25 knots for Clarence Strait. Southeast increasing to 25 knots tomorrow afternoon with 5-foot seas. Otherwise, the remainder of the coastline, lighter southerly winds as you go north there at about 15 knots. And over the inside waters, 20 knots across Stevens Passage, 20 knots for northern Lynn Canal with 4-foot seas. And then for Tuesday, still looking at southerly winds, 10 to 20 knots here along the central and north coast. Southwest now down to 15 knots for the south coast. Southeasterlies down to 15 for Clarence Strait. Then southerlies 15 to 20 knots here for the central and northern inside waters. And for the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, light variable winds at 10 knots with seas 5 feet. Same forecast there for Prince William Sound, except the seas will be slighter. And Cook Inlet, light variable winds tomorrow at about 10 knots with westerlies at 15 for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands there. Kodiak Island there, westerly winds 20 to 25 knots tomorrow. Seas running about 7 feet, and southwesterlies at about 20 knots there, give or take for Shelikof Strait. And then the outlook for Tuesday, a lot of light variable wind conditions here, so really laying down good or staying laid down there for Prince William Sound. North Gulf Coast here, all the way down into the Barren Islands and into Kamishak Bay. Light variable winds at 10 knots, seas just running 3 to 4 feet out here. Southwesterlies at 15 there along the east side of Kodiak Island with 5-foot seas. Shelikof Strait, same forecast, and just a light southwest breeze there blowing up Cook Inlet from the south and southwest. For Bristol Bay, westerly winds at 20 knots, and we've got small craft advisories here from Sitkinak over to Castle Cape, 25-knot winds there, and 20-knot winds for the Alaska Peninsula out of the west, with seas running at about 6 feet. For the Tuesday outlook, light variable conditions here in the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, staying westerly but dropping down to 15 knots for the Pacific side, and 15-knot winds again extend all the way up to Sitkinak, with Bristol Bay having the same forecast, 4 to 6 foot seas. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, west winds 20 to 25 knots, so there'll be some small craft advisories in those areas, with the central Aleutians westerlies at 15. Light variable wind conditions under a narrow ridge of high pressure out here over the western Aleutians. And that kind of holds out here through Tuesday. You may see some westerlies at 15 knots west of Adak, and then across the Adak-Atka area, west winds at 15 knots, and west northwesterlies at 15 knots for the Fox Islands, with seas running 5 to 6 feet. And for the southwest coast, northwesterlies at 10 to 15 for that area. Light variable winds for the northern Bering Sea, and west winds coming down to 20 knots for the Pribilof Islands, west 15 for St. Lawrence Island. Those turn northerly on Tuesday up to 20 knots, otherwise northwest along the southwest coast. Light variable winds for the Pribilofs on up into the northern Bering Sea for Tuesday. Up along the Arctic coast, pretty much light northerly winds continue, or north-northeast here for the central and eastern coast. Kind of a northwest, really laid down. That's almost just calm winds there for the east side. And for northeast winds at 20 knots again for tomorrow. Northerlies from Wales to Cape Thompson there at about 20 knots as well. But those come down, at least on the west side here, down to about 15 knots, but staying a little brisker here for Cape Lisburne down to Cape Thompson. Actually, northerlies at 20 knots all the way down to Wales again. And for the eastern Arctic coast, west-northwest breeze at about 10 knots with seas maybe up to 2 feet. And for tonight, rain shifts into the northern southeast coast and then spreads southward gradually. Showers continue along the North Gulf Coast. Look for some numerous showers over south central Alaska tonight. Chance of thunderstorms right through here, staying dry back to the northwest and continuing to dry out over the southwest interior. And that should lead to a little bit more sunshine over some of the areas out there, but still showers in the forecast here for south central Alaska, but becoming more scattered and isolated in nature. Still showery along the North Gulf Coast. Wet for the Panhandle about sums it up. Scattered thunderstorms over the eastern interior, and some showers dropping from the Pribilofs into the eastern Aleutians Alaska Peninsula. Then a trough swings in and brings a chance of thunderstorms to the western Alaska Range and eastern Kuskokwim Valley down into northeast Bristol Bay. Otherwise, again, scattered thunderstorms over the eastern interior and showers still in the forecast for the southeast coast for Tuesday and Tuesday night. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.